Hello, and welcome to Tactically Sound. Hello, my co-host, JumbyJumbwa, Dwarven King of the Wasteland.
Glad to be here.
Yeah, would a Dwarven King of the Wasteland be a ghoul, Vault Dweller, Wastelander, Brotherhood of Steel, Enclave, Raider, NCR? What do you think JumbyJumbwa would be if he was in the Wasteland?
Oh gosh, I naturally lean towards Vault Dweller, and something to do with management's experiments has to do with dwarven lore, maybe, or like the legend of dwarves. Like, can we actually somehow create this underground dwarven society in this vault? I don't know, where they like to mine. Maybe they made the vault next to a gold mine or something, right? Like, how does gold affect the vault? And this is where Jumby is. Something like that.
That does make a lot of sense that a dwarf would be in a vault underground.
Yes. Thus the Vault Dweller.
Well, if this is if this is your first time tuning in to Tactically Sound, we cover RPGs, Bethesda, and we're doing a mini series on Fallout, the series on Prime, and we're going to break down episode 2, and this episode is called The Target. Matt, what did you think overall of this episode?
I think it had some really great moments, but piggybacking off the first episode, it had some moments, especially with the Maximus's character, where I was starting to learn more about his character and understanding what directions the writers want to take this character, what story they were trying to tell. So I started seeing more of that, and this is the episode where the jury was starting to come out for Maximus for me, which we talked about last week, that it ended up paying off. But this is where we start seeing some of that weirdness, I think, where they're trying to show the fandom of the power suit, but then also the rawness and rawness of the world, the wasteland that they're in. So excited to talk about that more and hear your thoughts on it.
Yeah, I thought before we dive in, because I was looking up the synopsis that we're using on the Fallout Wiki and taking notes for myself as I was rewatching the episode today. So I was like, let's review the timeline one more time, and maybe it's something we end up doing every time. But 2077 is when the bombs drop. That's when Jumby and the Yetti Den are old men sitting on their recliners in downtown LA, and the bomb wipes us away.
Does not become the
that's where our
Vault
story
Dweller.
would conclude. No, yeah, maybe you are like, you get a warning from your vault management, and you're like, you kind of like step away and you leave for your vault, and I'm like, where's Jumby? And then I see the light.
Well, if I start wearing
that's the end for me.
all blue suits and I have a very long beard, you know it's happening.
Yeah, totally. So then Fallout 76 starts 2102, so about 25-ish years after the bomb drops, and then Fallout 1 takes place in 2161, so almost 100 years after the first bomb drops. Fallout Tactics is 2197, fairly like 30 years after Fallout 1. Fallout 2 is 2241, so now we're about like 200-ish years away from the initial bomb drop. Fallout 3 is another 30 years after Fallout 2. Fallout New Vegas is a couple years after Fallout 3. Fallout 4 is a couple years after Fallout New Vegas. And Fallout TV show is a couple years after Fallout 4. So, with the Target episode 2, it all starts with Dr. I believe, is it Siggy Wilzig or Siggy Wilzig? We'll just call him Wilzig.
Yes.
He is in the past in a cool flashback. I really enjoyed this flashback, especially the second watch, because I don't think I totally remembered that he was an Enclave member, and we're seeing the Enclave, and it's only a couple years before 2022-96, and I believe that in Fallout 4 there's not a whole lot of Enclave content. So I think a lot of the Enclave stuff is Fallout 3. So I'm not even sure if there's a ton of Enclave stuff in Fallout New Vegas, but we're seeing that the Enclave is still around in 22, probably like, who knows, maybe 2290. And so he escapes, and there is a bounty. And so I don't know what you thought, but I was kind of under the impression that Wilzig was the same age as everyone else. But I don't think that's the case, because he's only been gone from the Enclave for a couple years. So what we're seeing in the Enclave is not like a faraway flashback. It's only a couple years.
Do you think it was a couple years, or I thought it was within the year? Because what it makes me think is he was escaping the Enclave, right? And once he escaped, that was a pretty intense escape. They're immediately gonna know what lab he was in, who was assigned to that lab. It was Wilzig, and they're already going to start sending out to all the 6 agencies who to start looking for. So to me, I was under the impression that this was all happening within, a span of maybe a couple weeks for me.
I think you're right. And I think the couple years is the lifespan of the dog.
Yes.
CX404.
Yes.
So that's making sense. So the dog was born a couple years ago.
Yes.
And now, so we see him in the beginning through a couple years at the Enclave before. Right. And then when he escapes, when the dog is now, fairly grown. Right. Now we're in present time. Right. Essentially. Or a couple weeks before, like you said. Yep. In the past, some years before 2296, Enclave researcher Dr. Wilzig helped breed dogs in, and this is a note that I took, Behavioral Engineering Room 3. So the tests that they were running on these puppies, which honestly, the first time I watched that, I thought those were mole rats. I didn't know that those were the baby puppies. So it was like so much more sad knowing that these were little German Shepherd puppies.
I know. And then they're doing the whole what is it? It reminded me of The Giver, where like some babies get to live and some babies don't get to live. But instead of humans, it's the dogs. Like they're weighing them, and if they're under a certain amount of weight, then it's a bad dog, and they're gonna have to incinerate it. But we get dog meat who is saved by Wilzig, which is pretty awesome.
Yeah. Which is, they really endear you to the dog so quickly. I was like, oh my God, I love CX404. And so so then they say Wilzig is, what I wanted to ask you before we move past this though is the Enclave facility design aesthetic for me was unique and nails what I'd hope the Enclave factory or facility would look like on camera. What are your thoughts on the design? Because it's a really big building, right? It's massive. I like the way they shot it. It doesn't feel post-apocalyptic at all. It feels really Mad Men-y, really
Right.
Cold War, kind of 1960s,
Yes.
1950s. So it's kind of interesting, how kind of fantastical this world is because somewhere in Northern California, people are living pretty organized, structured lives that looks straight out of the probably 1950s, 1960s. What do you think of the Enclave facility?
At first, I was wondering if people are going to understand that this is still post-apocalyptic, or if they're going to think they're now in the past again, in our modern day.
Right. That's what I
But
thought the
right.
first time.
But then there's
Yeah.
all these hints that they quickly show you with like he's like wearing like he's wearing a Pit Boy, some sort of what was
Yeah.
that?
Yeah. He's wearing a Pit Boy.
Okay, so he's
Yeah.
wearing a Pip Boy as well. So they give you some hints where it's like it seems like this is some sort of high tech facility existing in the post apocalyptic setting. So I'm now thinking and wondering if sorry, I totally lost my train of thought. What were we talking about
Well, you
again?
were talking about will people realize that they're looking at a post-apocalyptic facility?
Right.
And that, to me, that's the merging of design philosophy of the franchise itself, which is essentially that there's more or less kind of one through line aesthetic. It's that the world stopped kind of designing around the 1950s, mid-century, and like
Yeah.
what does the future look like if it remains that way? And this is really played out in this scene, which I
Right.
love. I'll take style over making sense any day. But yeah, it's
But
it's like
I
that Kurt
wanted to.
Vonnegut.
I was leading up to the point of wanting to. I remember now. I wanted to say that I really liked that it was a contrasting style facility to what we were already seeing in the post-apocalyptic era, and it really made this group of people stand out as a faction, which is super important in Fallout. So I think the creative choices were really well done, actually, especially watching it a second time, like you said. Like I enjoyed this a lot more a second time because I was clearly more easily able to notice the Fallout influence with factions, and not just through the character, but the setting. So I liked it.
Yeah, I love the Enclave. I think they're becoming my favorite faction to keep an eye on. I think they're super interesting the more I learn about them. So seeing this facility in like kind of a big budget, it honestly kind of reminded me of a similar opening to a show like Miss Maisel. Like that kind of cool world building through amazing sets, amazing costuming, amazing cinematography. It really sets you into this world, right? And it feels
Right.
a little familiar. Like we've seen lab suits before, but the technology that is sci-fi integrates into this grounded kind of presentation really well. You mentioned the Pit Boy, the dogs. There's the, what I saw someone on Reddit, which they called it a MacGuffin, which I think is like a screenwriting term for like the magical device, But that magical device, which just be warned, this spoiler cast is assuming you've already watched episode 8, but
Right.
the MacGuffin being the cold fusion device. So there's kind of two main components happening in the scene. We're getting to know the dog, but we're also getting to know the device that he's also harboring. He kind of has two secrets. One, he falsified the record to save the dog. And then two, he's developed or come in contact with this technology that Moldiver also has a connection to. And it's a little hazy. Again, the timeline kind of confuses me, but how did he get a hold of her technology? Because she says she developed it. And what is it doing in an Enclave facility? Was she always Enclave? And he injects it into his neck, which, I wasn't really sure what to do with that information on the first watch. On the second watch, I think it was meant to kind of steal the technology and take it to Moldover. So, it sounds like kind of what I was gleaming from Reddit threads is like, the idea is kind of like he wouldn't have known about the, or the Enclave wouldn't have known about the technology he was developing, is what Reddit seems to think. Do you think that the technology, like, because when the office, or when the co-scientist walks into his room, he's surprised not only by the dog, but first he's surprised by the technology. So what are your thoughts of this unauthorized research project? They say the fruit of the project is a small pulsating blue bead that Wilczek injects into his neck. One day, one of his coworkers discovers the project, reports him, but CX-404 mauls and kills him to protect her master. Mm-hmm. And then Wilczek and CX-404 flee. So what do you think the connection is with this cold fusion project based off of your second rewatch?
Off my second rewatch, it makes me think that Wilczek, he's sympathetic with Moldaver's cause, and you could tell that he's sympathetic just from him having that hesitation about saving CX-404 and then deciding to save him, right? So there's a little bit of that, should I or should I not? And then like that tug on the heart, like I sympathize, right? So he wants a better future. And I think over the course of the dog's life, like we don't see, it's off camera, but I bet there's some sort of dialogue, some messaging that's happening between Wilczek and Moldaver. Like I think they're getting in contact, they're talking. She discovers that he's a sympathizer somehow, has a heart, so she knows how to manipulate people very well. So she uses that to her advantage, and he discloses that, at our facility we have XYZ technology. That's her end to start this plan of, maybe somehow try to escape with that technology and bring it to me at this location. That's what I'm thinking.
So for context, I thought it would be interesting to check in on, like, what is the Enclave? Just based off of the wiki, they wrote, the Enclave is a paramilitary organization and quasi-state originating from the pre-war American deep state, consisting of high-ranking political, military, and corporate figures. It claims to be the direct continuation of the United States and its government, despite seizing power by subverting continuity of government protocols and murdering non-enclave government survivors to continue the war against against communism. All Enclave members are considered war criminals. All Enclave members are considered war criminals and ruthlessly pursued, including by the New California Republic and the Brotherhood of Steel. So that's from the wiki. So I kind of see that playing out in this episode, how the Brotherhood of Steel is searching out this Enclave member. And so they would be happy to hunt down someone from the Enclave. And then we flip back to present, 2022-96, with Lucy basically seeing the reality of what the wasteland is like. It's like an oceanside ruin, and they're near Santa Monica, near downtown Los Angeles. She sees the remains of a family.
This area that she's in, and they're filming where she's going through this abandoned house, is a real place too. They filmed this in I think Southern Africa, at an old abandoned mining town, and it's been abandoned since like the 50s or something. So like if you rewatch it again, it's the scene where she's walking through the abandoned buildings and there's sand all throughout the entire house. This is an actual place where tourists, I think people can actually go visit this place and take pictures. So it's pretty cool that they got to show that here. And I think Ellie, the actress who plays Lucy, was mentioning that it looks a lot like California, but it's in South Africa.
Yeah, I think that's so cool when shows can go on location, and I think that's something that audiences crave. Getting that affirmation that it's real, more than
Yeah.
anything. It's the Lord of the Rings New Zealand,
It's not just a
moments
set.
of, oh, I can go there too. But one note that I saw that I thought was really cool was the Vault-Tec Plan D. These were like, I won't say it because I don't want to get demonetized, but they're pills from a bottle that are you take when you have no other option. And that's what they're like. It's kind of like Pirates of the Caribbean vibe, where there's just like, when you see the pirates and their skeletons and you get a story for what their life was like. That's
Right.
essentially what they do on when she's walking through. She sees these Vault-Tec Plan D pills, which is crazy because it further exemplifies Vault-Tec's affluence, where if you couldn't afford a Vault, they'll still sell you something. And so they're going to sell you Plan D pills, which is basically if you can't
Plan
afford
delete.
to survive. Yeah, right. So I thought that was an interesting illustration for her that there were people above who didn't get the chance to go into the vault. And there's a line that she had said later when she gets to Philly that kind of ties back. So I'll bring that up when we get there. But so she spends the night by a campfire and is awoken by CX-404, who approaches her camp and kills and eats a nearby rad roach, which is a cool way to introduce a creature from the Fallout bestiary.
Totally.
Yeah, and then Lucy notices Wilzig sitting nearby, and he talks about how rad roaches become larger and more predatory when they evolve. So I wrote down this quote that he said, which is, before the war, people joked about cockroaches surviving a nuclear blast, but they didn't nearly survive, they improved. So that's kind of mentioning how you're going to see more of that. Not all of the creatures in Fallout are negatively impacted by nuclear waste, in a sense, in that they're going to become more dangerous in the predator scale. Something as small as a cockroach is now this crazy creature that like the way they present the rad roach, it looks dangerous because you're already bought into. Yeah,
They are a threat.
Right.
My buddy Philip was just starting his first Fallout 4 playthrough, and he ended up saying, I hate this game. And I'm like, why? What's going on? He's like, dude, I keep dying to the roaches. Like, if you've never played a Fallout game before, and then you boot it up, it plays so differently than any other game. It actually feels like you're doing something wrong, like you're not aiming correctly. But in reality, they want you to start leveraging how their systems work, like the VAT system and everything. So he wasn't using that at all in the beginning. He was just trying to shoot them. But these roaches are fast. They've improved, right? So he just kept getting destroyed by roaches. And I was trying to tell him to use the VAT system to help you. That's what it's there for. But it's just funny to even see it in the show where they're still a threat.
Yeah, there's very few creatures in Fallout that are just totally not a threat. Like anything can gang up on you in the wasteland. And this reminds me, I've mentioned this to you, but the concept of street level crime in a sci-fi world where, in Andor it's seeing the TIE fighter. In Fallout it's seeing your first rad roach. Oh shoot, like this is actually a dangerous world. The smallest of small creature is much larger than you'd expect.
Right.
So Wilzig urges Lucy to go home, doubting her ability to adapt to the dangerous and violent wasteland. and Lucy asserts that she's not going back without her father. Wilzig suggests that her desires will change when she becomes a different animal and leaves with CX-404. I quoted that he said, "I do not think you'd be willing to do what it takes to survive." He also said, "If you insist on staying, then you will have to adapt." So he's kind of like that in the hero's journey, the friends, allies, and, you know, whatever. You come across a new character that's going to help you understand your hero's journey. And for him, he's telling her, you have to adapt. And the ghoul eventually tells her, you have to adapt. So
Right.
those who have been above ground, you know, they're trying to warn this vault dweller. He also knows her name, which is interesting as well. But yeah, another thing he says, the question is, will you still want the same things when you've become a different animal altogether? So what are your thoughts on Wilzig and his motivation so far?
So far, it sounds like he's, you know, again, he's a sympathizer. He's seeing this lonely vault dweller out there, and then goes up, sits with her, and realizes he recognizes her. So he's sticking around, and he's offering some advice and a well-wished warning to her to go back to the dwell. I think he, from a writer's perspective, he's definitely like you were saying, they're trying to foreshadow, kind of prepare the audience for what's going to happen to this character, so that we're not all weirded out when we see her do some bizarre things, which we know what happens in the Wasteland. I think he still has an aspect of mysteriousness. Like I at this point didn't know if I could trust him still, you know, even though I saw some of his sympathetic characteristics, the Good Samaritan, right? Part of me was like, this is the Wasteland. He's up to something, right? So I really enjoyed his character, and yeah, I think it's doing well to set up the story right here that he's going to be part of her hero's journey to somewhat extent.
Right. And so this moves into us meeting Maximus with the Brotherhood of Steel. So on the way to Philly, which I wrote down is most likely a landfill located somewhere near Santa Monica. I was curious why the name Philly, so I was looking it up, and the internet seems to think it's a landfill.
That makes
Maximus
sense.
attempts to bond with Knight Titus. To no avail, Titus demands they touch down early out of boredom. And yeah, I was curious, like, is there any more, what's the advantage of Titus dropping down early? That's one thing I didn't understand from his character's motivation.
Maybe it came from a place of like, he was, so right before that scene, he was making Maximus clean his piece, right?
Crotch armor.
Yeah, exactly. His cup, right? So he was like trying to show his dominance, assert his dominance over it, I think, over the squire position, right? The role Maximus was in. And it made me also think that him landing right after that was like, hey, I'm gonna like really freak this guy out. We're gonna go kill something, and he's gonna see how powerful I am, and he's going to completely submit to whatever I done. It was a way to mess with him, which I think influenced him, you know, in the future episodes, you know, when he gets a squire as well, this messing with him. So I think that's why he's trying to touch down early. It's to further mentally play with Maximus that he is this all-powerful armored knight, right? That he wants to be. Right.
So yeah, they trek through the wilderness. Maximus carries that comically large bag, the luggage, the over-encumbered
What's in there?
bag
What's
of
in the
holding.
bag?
Limited. I think it's the rifle.
Is it? Okay.
minigun?
I was like, what's in this giant bag? Is it like some sort of gnarly, either a radio tower or some sort of RPG or something? It's crazy.
Yeah, I've assumed that it was the rifle.
I see.
Simultaneously, Wilzig and CX-404 stop to rest by some discarded chemical waste barrels. 404 enters a cave and leaves carrying a human hand in her mouth. A horrified Wilzig realizes a dangerous monster is nearby. Later, Titus and Maximus happened upon the rest of the site and found evidence that their targets were there. Titus orders Maximus to investigate inside the cave before being attacked by I'm not really sure how you're supposed to pronounce this, Yao Guai, who destroys his weapon. Titus attempts to flee from the bear, but it mauls him outside the cave. Titus screams at Maximus to help him, and he shoots and kills the bear. Maximus removes the helmet off an injured Titus, who orders him to administer a stim pack to him while blaming him for the attack and verbally abusing him. Disgusted by his cowardice and tired of the mistreatment from him, Maximus withholds treatment from Titus. Titus warns his squire that he'll be executed for allowing his charge to die, but Maximus claims he'll be forgiven if he brings back the target. I thought this was interesting on the second watch. It actually makes a lot of sense that Maximus wouldn't save him because he's looking for the Stimpack bag, and it's clear that Titus is going to report back to Brotherhood of Steel that Maximus isn't up to snuff, and regardless if he saves Titus or not, he says, do you know what they do to, like weak squires?
Right.
It's all your fault. They're going to string you up, all this stuff. And so it's not as bad as I first thought. On first watch, you're thinking, wow, Maximus is really, really wanting that power armor. And I think, of course, he does. But it's almost like Titus gives him no choice. From playing the game, it's kind of like if that were me, I'd be like, oh, wait, you're not on my side? So I get the armor and...
Yeah, on a second watch, it was better and it makes more sense. And I'm so thankful that I caught what they were doing. Remember how in the first episode, Maximus gets in trouble. They think that he's the one who attacks Dane's foot. And he gets called into that meeting. He gets scolded and he almost seems like he's going to get kicked out. But then he becomes the new squire. Remember how scared and terrified he was? This is one of the moments where you realize there's this fear that Maximus struggles with in him. And it's an intense feeling and it rules him. But he doesn't want it to let him rule him. And you could see it in this scene here in episode 2 where he's panicking, wondering what to do. He doesn't like hearing that he's going to basically get screwed over and he's gonna maybe get the death sentence, and hearing that though was almost like sobering for him, where he was like, oh, like my greatest fear is to die without getting to achieve or get what I want out of this life, my dreams to be that hero in the power suit like that hero was for me when I was a kid. And that's where that fear of death and losing the dream was greater than this moral dilemma in a way. And where someone like you and me, like, gosh, I would be sitting there for hours, like, what do I do? Like, I get what I gotta do or whatever. Or even in the game, like, it makes it an easier choice. Like, oh, I'm just gonna do this to get the power armor. But I thought that was a very nice way how they I think the more I watch Maximus's character, even the second time around, I appreciate it. I get like what I was talking about last week, where there's a lot of inner dialogue that he's trying to act and show on the face, and I really appreciate the actor trying to give Maximus that justice I think the character deserves. Yes, this is an intense scene.
Yeah. Yeah. So then it transitions to Lucy, who encounters a farmer in a house in the desert, which I watched Tim Kane's review, and he said that this farmer really reminded him of an NPC that you might meet in Fallout 1. And so I was like, took a mental note, because I'm thinking, okay, I'm looking for those links. I haven't played Fallout 1, so I'm excited to play through it because I really want to see how influenced is the TV show by Fallout 1. And so that was a cool kind of thing to be aware of. He directs her to Philly despite having never been himself. He claims people often get killed there, includes several of his relatives. The farmer suggests that Lucy will live with him and claims to be dying. She declines and starts heading towards Philly. This guy was hilarious. This actor was
my favorite
really
line
funny.
from him was, "My aunt got killed there once." That was so funny.
Yeah. He was really, the second watch, I thought he was really funny. So then let's see here. So then it goes back to Maximus, who puts on the dead Titus's T60 power armor, which grants him incredible strength. In some ruins, he sees a chicken collector beating a salesman and intervenes, setting the salesman free. He praises Maximus as a scholar and a gentleman and admonishes the farmer for punishing his scientific curiosity. As the salesman runs off, the chicken collector tells Maximus he was beating the salesman for basically, what did he say? Like, the actual word he said was funny. Like, he's, I think I wrote it down. Let's see here. Cockroaches, clean, giant, and cumberbatch. Let's see. Follow. Oh yeah, so you've got water. The guy licks the tip of the water bottle, which was funny. And then smile. Oh, Toodles, you sir are a scholar and a gentleman. You should be commended. And then the guy says, it's just the guy was fucking my chicken. So yeah, this guy is like a weirdo, obviously, and I would love to know who they were inspired by, because he feels familiar. Like,
you know,
this
who
character
he reminds me of? Harry Potter, the guy the old man with the cat, the groundskeeper, not the groundskeeper, but. He looks like a guy from Harry Potter. I can't know that. I don't know that. If you guys know the name of who I'm thinking of, he has a cat, and he like always is trying to check if the kids are awake at night. That's who it reminds me of. That's what his character reminds me of. The salesman, right?
Yeah,
that's what we're
this
talking
guy.
About. The salesman.
Yeah. He has a lot of really cool scenes and is a funny kind of, I don't know, silly character that I think works really well. And then Lucy, we bounce back to Lucy, who walks through the Philly marketplace and is disconcerted by the inhabitants' rudeness and lack of helpful information. Downtown, she doesn't notice the ghouls sitting wayside, but finds a store filled with multiple items produced by Vault-Tec. The shop owner, Ma June, realizes Lucy is a vault dweller and laughs in her face. Let's see if I could find the note from that part, because for me, this was a really important scene.
Yeah.
So I wrote down... that the ghoul is watching. There's a bobblehead Pit Boy.
Yeah.
The place is called Ma's Rarity, so it's totally like a merchant that you would interact with in Fallout if you were playing. You know,
There's
if this
so
was
many
the game.
like little props and things that they're doing for the fans. Easter eggs, right? There's so many Easter eggs in this scene coming into Philly, setting up this altercation that's about to happen here. It's really fun, especially for Fallout fans.
I thought it was funny. There's a sign in Philly called Dentist, and then below it says Barber. Kind of the way I interpreted it is it's the same person.
Yeah.
Which is funny. But so Lucy and Ma have this conversation, and Lucy basically says it would be safe to assume you do business with criminals. She brings up Moldover. And then the reality is we're going to save America. And then Ma basically says, when exactly did you plan on saving America? Kind of crushing the Vault Dweller's dream. And she said the vaults are just a hole in the ground for rich folks to hide in. And we Vault Dwellers... Oh, and then this is what Lucy says in response. We Vault Dwellers recognize and are grateful for the privileged position we were born into, which sounds like such a prepared line that they learn in school or something. Like, the way she recalls that line is, to me, it's like a script that the Vault Dwellers are given for when they interact with Wastelanders. And so, yeah, she's coming to grips to reality with the effects of being a Vault Dweller, how a Vault Dweller is perceived in the Wasteland, and Ma-Jun, does not buy into the propaganda of Vault-Tec.
Right.
So then, let's see here. So they have their conversation. They write in the wiki that her attitude hardens when Lucy mentions Moldiver. And they have that conversation that we just mentioned. And then Wilzig and CX-404 arrive in Philly and once more encounter Lucy. His knowledge of her vault puts her off, and he once more encourages her to go home. Ma-Jun greets Wilzig and again orders Lucy to leave. The ghoul interrupts, and Ma-Jun firmly reminds him that ghouls are banned from Philly. He ignores her and reports the large bounty on Wilzig's head. Ma-Jun reveals she's been paid to transport him out of Philly, and the ghoul shoots Wilzig's foot off. That scene, when I saw that in the first watch, I was really surprised. But it was encouraging to see that there's high stakes, right? It's creating that like street level high stakes of maybe a show like Daredevil or something like that, where, every interaction feels dangerous and weighty. So then a shootout breaks out as several Philly residents try to take out the ghoul and are promptly dispatched. Amid it, the ghoul eats some cherry tomatoes from a vendor and pays for them by dropping some caps off. He takes several bullets in the back to little effect and kills the other shooters. He injures Ma-Jun and is mauled by CX-404, and he stabs the dog, which is a very traumatizing scene, which does get paid off when he returns with the stim pack and heals the dog, and then the dog doesn't go away. So what did you think of the town of Philly and the shootout, the introduction of the ghoul?
I like I said last week, the ghoul is my favorite character in the show. I really, really like watching him on screen. Goggins, I think he's a great actor, and I think this action scene was just really fun. And super Fallout-y. It reminded me of the VAT system, where there was like some slowing down time. You're seeing some video game-ish like gore, but like in a good way. It's playing with the physics of the gun itself, where it like blows a hole that you can see through the chest and then into the head of the guy behind him, and that just blows up. Like it's just very over the top and a little bit comedic, but in a very tasteful and fun, entertaining way, where you can still take it seriously and be like, oh, dude, that is badass. That this character is tough. He is a threat, and he's messing everything up right now. I don't know what's gonna happen, where they're gonna take this storyline, who's gonna team up with who's each other's enemy. It's just a very fun Western moment of high stakes, and it's a shootout. Yeehaw!
Totally, yeah. And then the introduction of Maximus kind of brings in this lack of knowledge on Maximus' parts of how to actually use the power armor against a knowledgeable foe like the ghoul. And the ghoul even mentions something about reading the manual, and he then embarrasses Maximus, who is trying to save the day. And I think it was a really good introduction of the three characters and how they interact with the world and the choice and consequence of events. And so the ghoul ends up defeating Maximus, and he heals the dog. Lucy and Wilzig get away. So in a sense, I think Maximus is successful in that he was able to distract the ghoul.
Right.
His intention was to get rid of the ghoul, but he at least distracted the ghoul long enough for Lucy and Wilzig to get away.
Right.
And they stop and rest at a crashed Russian satellite, which I actually thought this was a Chinese satellite, but maybe it was Russian. I guess
I don't remember.
CCP is what I wrote down. But near Los Angeles International Airport. And then Wilzig's injury has worsened, and he's visibly bleeding from his prosthetic limb. He claims he will die before reaching the destination. Lucy optimistically encourages him to press ahead, but he reveals that he has ingested a Vault-Tec Plan D. Oh, so that's the tie-in with the Plan D cyanide pill, the most human product Vault-Tec ever made. He says he's still valuable to Moldiver if Lucy can bring his head to her and instructs her to decapitate him with a buzzsaw. He calls her Miss McLean, and Lucy asks how he knows her name, but he dies before answering. Lucy grimly prepares to cut his head off as he requests, and she says okie dokie, which is the name of the first episode. Or no, it's not the name of the first episode, it's the tagline of the first episode. So that's the episode. Overall, I thought episode 2 was more fun on the second watch, and I noticed a lot more components. I think the show serves as a really good home base for the series to kind of, depending on your curiosity of the factions, you could kind of say, oh, I want to learn more about Brotherhood of Steel. Maybe I'll play Brotherhood of Steel Tactics, or I really want to learn more about the NCR. Maybe I'll play Fallout New Vegas. You know, I think it's going to serve, and it already has. I mean, the numbers of Fallout players has grown crazy over the last couple weeks.
I think on the first weekend it released, I think on Steam, the numbers were like 20,000 players, just new players on Steam alone. That's not including all of the PlayStation and Xbox, so consoles. So everyone is playing it. Like I was saying, my buddy who's never played it before now was trying it out, getting killed by the roaches. And I have several other friends, including my brothers, who are starting new playthroughs too. So it's definitely done well at bringing back the magic of Fallout and this nostalgia we all have and love we have for this world, the wasteland. And I did too think it was a good episode, much better second time watching. I think because of my concerns I had for the show before my first watch, with even the trailer, this was the episode that we actually got to see what was taken out and teased to us before the show came out. That scene where they are all meeting each other for the first time. And I remember feeling skeptical about these characters still, except for Goggins. I knew he was going to do a good job. But I still thought like the jury was out when I watched this episode for the first time. So I definitely was really critical of Maximus's character and what they were doing with his storyline, as well as just, is it all working with them coming together and meeting each other for the first time? How's the pacing and flow? Second time through, it was much better than the first time. So this is definitely a show that I'm feeling like grows on you the more you spend time with it. What do you think that too, Spencer?
Yeah, I do. I definitely recommend a second watch. I think that it seems a little bit like on the second watch, you know what Easter eggs you're looking for. You're trying to read more text, trying to pay more attention to the world building, character motivations, the acting performances. I think all of that is more compelling on the second watch for sure.
And what's nice is there's depth to it where you can do that on a second watch, like watching Harry Potter or Lord of the Rings. There's this kind of replay value that Fallout naturally has. So it's kind of funny and cool that even the show is kind of creating that for us, because they're just stuffing so many Easter eggs in there, especially if you go out and play the game, and you're going to notice them, and it's going to be a fun time. You could probably even play a drinking game with how many Easter eggs you have in this game, in this TV show.
Totally. Well, if you guys enjoyed episode 2, then check in with us next week for our spoiler cast on episode 3. We will be doing all 8 episodes, and yeah, this has been Tactically Sound, our Fallout mini-series of the spoiler cast for the show on Prime. So thank you, JumbyJumbwa, for joining us, and we will see you all next time. Later. Bye.
Peace.
Yeah.